Next session by Mr. Andy Leach, who is the Principal Addictions Therapist and Director, Visions by Promises, with his slot title, Gaming, Crypto, Gambling, Sex, the Online Addictions. Mr. Andy, over to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I hope everyone had a delicious lunch. Ah, there I am, so I'm up there. Yeah, so that's myself. I'm the Director of Addiction Services at Visions by Promises in Singapore, where I'm a therapist and I've been working in the addiction field for about 15 years. Previous to that, I was in Thailand working in residential treatment. So when Dr. Prem called me, said, "What do you want to talk about?" I think I'd just seen a client, a young man, who I'd been talking to, who'd sort of like from 16 onwards, where he'd been in rehab. He'd sort of had a long history of sex addiction, drug addiction, and currently is at university in America. So I was seeing him over Zoom, and he's now sort of got a marijuana addiction and a trading addiction. And he was telling me about these shoes. So he was telling me about these shoes, which is not a shoe, it's a virtual shoe. It's what's called an NFT, a non-fungible token, I think that an NFT is. And what that is, and I still don't understand, because he tried to explain it to me, and I found it very difficult to understand. He owns this NFT, and the more he exercises, he earns money. So he walks, jogs, and he earns actual money, but in the form of crypto. So he gains cryptocurrency by exercising and by owning this NFT. The NFT then gains value, he can then trade it, etc. So to me, it was just like, wow. And and he was so enthusiastic and passionate about this. It was like, what is going on here? And it felt like slightly addictive. And I'd had other clients as well that I'll tell you about in a bit who also have fallen into this trap as well. But the intention, therefore, of why this topic is very much about increased awareness around internet addiction, about what's going on in the digital world. Are we asking the right questions? Are we aware when clients walk in our door of what needs to be assessed? And really, do we need to broaden the definition of addiction? So that, because, my reaction to his Stepan NFT was, this is me, that's the limit of my technological understanding. That was me at his age. That was the limit of technology. That sort of moved on today. Now on my phone, I have an app that gives me access to maybe 100,000 radio stations at any moment. It's called Radio Garden, if anyone's interested. It's excellent. Clicker working? Yes. But addiction has been around for many, many years. It's accelerated. What I want to talk about today as well is about how it's accelerated and how technology adds to that acceleration. But it's been around for thousands of years. So even I read a very good book recently called, I think it's called The Cure. I can't remember. Anyway, but it's all about the history of addiction. And this poem goes back to 1000 BC. It's from the Rig Veda, and it says, "Dice verily," this is a gambler, "dice verily are armed with goads and driving hooks, deceiving and tormenting, causing grievous woe. They give frail gifts and then destroy the man who wins, thickly anointed with the player's fairest good. The gambler's wife, families, as Dr. Prem was talking about earlier, is left forlorn and wretched. The mother mourns the son who wanders homeless. In constant fear, debt, seeking riches, he goes by night unto the home of others. Play not with dice. No, cultivate your corn. Enjoy the gain and deem that wealth sufficient. There are thy cattle, there thy wife, O gambler." So what I find really interesting in this poem, this 3,000-year-old poem, is enjoy the gain and deem that wealth sufficient. Because that, to me, is where addiction is it's never sufficient. For me, addiction, whatever I'm doing, whether it's drugs, alcohol, whatever, it's never enough. And they knew this 3,000 years ago. But technology has always driven addiction. So ever since we learnt to distill sort of corn and wheat and barley, we've learnt to distill it into alcohol. We basically learnt to turn sugarcane into the instant hit of the M&M. And I think this illustrates the acceleration of addiction particularly well. Stolen from Dr. Rob Weiss, but if anyone knows who Dr. Rob Weiss is, he sort of talks that he's an expert on sex addiction. But this is a petrol station in the 1950s in America. And inside there, you'd find batteries, tires, polish, wax, etc. And this is what you'd find in a gas station today. So this, to me, is the acceleration of addiction. So the gas station today will have wine, beer, cigarettes, electronic cigarettes, crisps, sugar, carbs, salt, everything that is bad for you. And basically it's there. It's like an instant hit. As we're driving, we drive through these gas stations and we basically pick up stuff to give us that instant hit. So addiction is accelerating. So what exactly is addiction? Well, I use the ASAM definition. I particularly like this definition. It's a treatable chronic medical disease involving interactions amongst brain circuits, genetics, environment, and life experience. This is the bit that I wanted to draw our attention to today. It's like people with addiction use substances or engage in behaviors that become compulsive and often continue despite harmful consequences. I think we often overlook the behavioral addictions. And so that's pretty much what I wanted to sort of focus on today. It's like, what's going on online? How is this acceleration of technology, this new digital world, how is that playing out in terms of addictions? One of the first things that I came across when contemplating this was a very well-documented case that some of you may well have heard of, tragic case of this couple in South Korea in 2009 who were playing a game called Prius Online. And in this game, you have a virtual child, a mini child avatar called Anima. And what you do is you nurture this child and you sort of do everything to take care of it. You feed it, virtual feeding, etc. Unfortunately, this couple had a real-life child, and the child died through neglect because they basically didn't feed the child. So to me, that is internet addiction. I mean, tragic, absolutely tragic. So Dr. Kimberly Young, and the reference to this will be at the end of the talk, she developed on the left-hand side a 20-question, I've distilled it, but a 20 questions internet addiction test. And in this, she looks at how much time is spent, relationship interference, unfulfilled responsibilities, preoccupation, emotional dysregulation, the physical effect, the inability to control, denial, and the effect that it has on the spirits that other speakers have spoken about, the spiritual element of this, the lack of meaning, the lack of purpose. But interesting, if you compare it to the right-hand side, the DSM criteria for alcohol use disorder, to me, there's very little difference. The alcohol use disorder, time spent, inability to control, unfulfilled responsibilities, relationship interference, and so on. And the only thing that possibly we could say is slightly different is withdrawal. But actually, in my experience of working with people with internet addiction, including gaming, pornography addiction, the other addictions like crypto, etc., that I'm going to look at, there is distinct withdrawal symptoms that one should be aware of as well. So really, I suppose the point I'm trying to make here is that addiction is addiction, is addiction. you know. And so when we come to look at something like internet addiction, perhaps the way that we deal with it, there will be specific practicalities as to how you can help mitigate harm, but at the same time, it's another form of this disease called addiction. So research points us in certain directions. First piece of research which I'm highlighting here basically points out the comorbid psychological disorders and mood disorders of OCD, PTSD, ADHD, and anxiety in internet addiction. Also, a high correlation of personality disorders with high harm avoidance, novelty seeking, reward dependence, and low cooperativeness. That's within adolescence. Some early weak parental bonds and poor quality of mother-offspring emotional and social reciprocity. That's a difficult word to say. Predisposition to negative personal relations, poor social skills, self-perceived loneliness, interpersonal incompetence, sadness, and anxiety. That, to me, is directing myself as a clinician to look through a lens of attachment theory as to how it is that people end up so attached to a particular behavior and way of self-soothing. And also, stressful or traumatic experiences may have a role in the onset of internet addiction amongst adolescents. So what the theories, how can we sort of look at internet addiction? Well, some theorists point towards the neurobiology, so the increased dopamine release in the mesolimbic pathway, decreased executive function, so the prefrontal cortex obviously diminished and therefore affecting our ability to regulate impulse. The very obvious one of social connection, so the fear of missing out. Attachment, as I said, insecure attachment, using activities online as coping skills, and self-psychology, self-validation, inadequate ego mechanisms, so self-soothing through self-object experience. So that is what I see with a lot of my clients. It's just another form of self-soothing, whether it be chemsex, drugs, alcohol, internet, behavior on the internet. Basically, it's just another form of self-soothing. Yeah, which then has the knock-on effect of leading to loneliness, low self-esteem, and difficulties in interpersonal relationships. Yeah, and Catherine Steiner-Adair, author of this book, Protecting Childhood and Family Relationships in the Digital Age, said, we're throwing screens at children all day long, giving them distractions rather than teaching them how to self-soothe, to calm themselves down. In fact, Dr. Prem mentioned earlier about seeing prams with iPads in them. That's tragic to me. It's like, what are you teaching that child? You're not teaching them how to regulate themselves, how to have impulse control. And actually, I can't remember, who was it who was talking? The speaker earlier this morning, Dr. Hassin, I think, was talking about the goldfish. A study by Microsoft very recently found that since the year 2000, which was about the time of the mobile phone revolution, the average digital attention span has dropped from 12 seconds to 8 seconds. And the average attention span for the notoriously ill-focused goldfish is actually 9 seconds. So the goldfish, going round and round in his bowl, has a higher attention span than most people who are sitting on their phones going tuk, 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 and looking for that like, looking for that tiny little like that's going to give them a hit of dopamine. So basically impulse control is impaired, there's the inability to self-regulate, and we just have this immediate quick fix of the screens. I am very guilty of it myself. Even during this conference, I find myself, I can't put the phone down. It's so difficult. But what I want to look at now is about content. It's like, yes, the internet, but what's going on the internet? Well, so for instance, Grand Theft Auto, which I'm sure most of you have heard of, their latest edition, Grand Theft Auto 5, has a strip club in it. So there's a sort of conflation of gaming, pornography, and also there's gambling going on within the games as well. And you've got now also this phenomenon of online Bitcoin casinos, so which basically there's no boundaries and they're not subject to any regulation because they're out in the ether, and there's very ease of access. So in terms of gambling, there's much easier access for the people who are prone to addiction. So online digital culture is making behavioral addictions instantly accessible. So, and there's a cross-fertilization of behavioral addictions between gambling, pornography, and gaming. So if we look at sex addiction itself is not in the DSM. It's not defined, but what you do find in the ICD is compulsive sexual behavior disorder, where we talk about persistent pattern of failure to control intense, repetitive sexual impulses. So again, looking back at impulse control, or urges resulting in repetitive behavior. Symptoms may include repetitive sexual activities. So how do we think that addiction is actually the internet is accelerating addiction? Well, I would say that basically these are some of the things that I've come across in my work with my clients in Singapore. They basically have 24-hour instant access, anywhere, anytime. This is specifically with compulsive sexual behavior disorder. There are these meetup apps, Tinder, Grindr, as someone was talking about earlier. Virtual sexual activities, the ability to have sort of virtual sex with people anywhere, any place, any time. Increased access to paraphilias, cameras on phones. So one of the things that I deal with a lot in Singapore, and we were talking about this at lunch, is upskirts, people doing upskirt activities on their digital phones. The progression. So I have a client going down this virtual rabbit hole. I have a client who's sort of very interested in Japanese anime. And what he did was he basically went through this interest in Japanese anime. He started looking at pictures of women and ended up basically with an interest in child pornography. And which he came to me of his own volition, absolutely devastated that his inability to control his behavior had reached this point where he was doing things against his own value system. He's actually been completely free of all pornography, masturbation, and everything for over 9 months now, and his wife and him just got pregnant, where she was going to leave him, actually, when she first found out. So, yeah, people do recover in all areas. And in fact, so what the internet is giving us is accessibility, affordability, and anonymity. So a lot of the time it's free, it's anonymous, and it's completely accessible. And there's no regulation. No regulation. I was going to tell you also about... yeah, no, that's okay. I'll move on to the next slide. Yeah. So... we talked earlier about sort of like sexual content being included in games, but just again the awareness. I'm sure everyone in this room knows that gaming use disorder was included in the ICD in 2018 by the World Health Organization. I have a huge influx of clients. I mean, where I work in Singapore, before that I worked in Thailand. Most of my clients were substance use disorder or alcoholism. Now in Singapore, I'd say probably about sort of 15 to 20% gaming use disorder. I'd say about 50% of my clients compulsive sexual behavior disorder. So I'm seeing more and more of these people, and most of the behavior is going on online. So I mean, just as an example, I have a client. His mum wrote to me the other day. I mean, he's dropped out of university. She doesn't know, but what he's doing, he was gaming, I'd say 14 hours a day, but we managed to get the computer out of his bedroom and put it in the living room so that he was accountable to his parents. But what he was doing was he also had a phone, and he was in his bedroom and he was watching pornography, or he's on social media apps. He literally has a sort of complete screen addiction. And she wrote to me the other day saying he's failed all his most recent subjects. He's restarted gaming, although he says he plays for 4 hours a day. He wakes up late. He's on the phone or laptop in his room all day and into the night too. He's applied for a part-time job. When we try to engage in activities at home, he's not interested. When we encourage him to go to the gym, he would say, there's no point, I don't want to live long, and better to die early. So to me, I mean, gaming use disorder is as pernicious and can destroy lives as much as substance use disorder. So just some research. The World Health Organization estimates 3% of gamers are at risk of gaming addiction. And in a study in Ontario, 13% of teenagers report symptoms of a problem. 9% of high school students bring gaming problems to college with them, so that's a 1 in 10. And psychiatry research, some research published there, so that 84% of gaming addicts knew they had a problem over 12 months ago, and 48% of gaming addicts meet the criteria for depression. The other thing that's going on within gaming is that there's a crossover into gambling. So you have these things called loot boxes. People know what loot boxes are? Yes? No? Loot boxes are basically consumable virtual items within the game that can be redeemed for a selection of further virtual items, like guns and knives and things like that in a shoot-up game. And they range... you can get simple customization options for a player's avatar or game-changing equipment such as weapons and armor. But basically, there's an element of chance. You get given options with these loot boxes, and there's an element of chance as to what you get. And these loot boxes have been seen in games for children as young as 3 years old. So what they're doing is teaching children how to play a game of chance from a very young age. But the loot boxes have been banned in some places in the world, been banned in Netherlands and Belgium, and some EA Sports were found guilty of non-compliance, and they're under criminal investigation in Belgium. A lot of countries around the world have been looking into banning loot boxes. The UK, we were hoping they were going to, but after consultation saying there's evidence of a consistent association between the features and problem gambling, the UK government decided not to ban them. So there's a sort of, unfortunately, a pursuit of profit taking precedence over what's good for young people. Further to sort of like loot boxes, you have things going on the internet such as digital horse racing. So you can now get these NFTs like that shoe that I was telling you about. You can buy digital horses that are NFTs. And they're based on blockchain technology. Don't ask me about blockchain technology when it comes to questions, please. I will not be able to explain it. But these horses are NFTs, and you can buy them and breed them, and you can race them. And they change hands for six-figure sums, $100,000 plus. And to race them, you need to have basically cryptocurrency. You buy into the races with crypto. So it's a whole nother world that my younger clients are all involved in. In fact, Tristan Harris that famously said, and he's one of Google's former design ethicists, that phone, which I haven't got on me, it's over there, I'm missing it right now, but he said it's your slot machine in your pocket. So there's an intensification, a crossover of gaming into gambling, epitomized also, I would say, by crypto trading. And I'd suggest that we need to understand this convergence of gaming and gambling involving blockchain and crypto technology in order to reduce risk. So I think knowledge and awareness, which is what I'm hoping that is coming from this presentation today, is what is needed. So when someone comes in your room, so they may basically be presenting for substance use disorder or alcoholism, but they're almost definitely, particularly for my younger clients, I ask them about what their activity is like in the digital world, because there's often many other things that are going on. Classically, we refer to it as addiction interaction disorder. So you have these apps on your phone now, like Robinhood, which enable you to trade 24/7. So you've got it in your pocket. I have clients who basically wake up on the hour every hour to check their apps, and you see like this graph of of ups and downs. I met up with a friend of mine who is an addiction therapist who owns a small treatment center here in Southeast Asia. And he's 20 years clean and sober. And I met up with him for lunch 2 days ago in Singapore. And he said, Andy, I lost all my money on crypto. Lost everything in the last year. And he said it was exactly the same. He's a recovering drug addict. And he said it's exactly the same as drug addiction. He literally said, I was waiting for that high. I was, this. Up here, I was just high as a kite. And as soon as it came down, he said, that's it. He said, I was in withdrawal. I was shaking. I was like, ah. And this is a very common story. Not only him, but I've heard it from my clients. I have another client, a young man, 18 years old, seeing me for alcohol, fighting, drug addiction, steroids, lack of self-esteem, and he tried to kill himself the other day. Basically, his father had given him a load of money to invest in trading, and he went all in and lost the lot. He then contacted me, and basically he was self-harming. It was horrendous. So I've been on to the parents. I've told them this is a very bad idea. And another client, alcoholic client in sobriety, when he stops, his wife wrote to me and said, I later realized when he was sober that's also the time he was indulging in high-risk crypto trading, where he lost literally everything in the bank here in Singapore. Yeah. So this is a very real and present addiction that is going on. So Lisa Nauer, who's a director of gambling studies at Rutgers University in the USA, said the people that are designing these apps, they know what it is to get people more engrossed in something. That high action, that quick turnover, that positive reward. It's why people like lottery scratch-off tickets. I don't know if you have those in Malaysia, but you definitely do in the UK, because they scratch madly and then they get the reward in that second, and that gives you a burst of dopamine. So it's all the same. So I get a like on Facebook. I get a sort of a mini hit of dopamine. I get this going up. Dopamine is being released into my system. And so these are designed to work on this. So are the games, so are the loot boxes. They hook you in. We've reached a point now where actually there is a rehab in Scotland called Castle Craig, which an article online refers to as Crypto Castle. Well, the world's first Bitcoin rehab. They have a specific program for dealing with cryptocurrency addiction. One ex-trader quoted in the Washington Post said, crypto is like going into Hades. I can bring out it brings out the darkest parts of ourselves if we have an addictive personality, and I have a very addictive personality. And some research in Finland recently, this year, said crypto traders also have high rates of gambling, video game, and internet addiction. So there's something going on here, isn't there? Yeah, and in fact, a voice from the other side of the tracks, the managing director of Alpha Wealth, which is sort of one of these people that runs these trading platforms and deals in cryptocurrency, he said, Nicholas Charalambous, Managing Director of Alpha West. So previously, I would have described cryptos as shares on steroids. Now, I would say they're shares with jetpacks and boosters and then some. So that's coming from the people who are actually doing this work. Another client said, I felt like I'd lost my life because I invested everything in crypto. I'd built every dream I had on there. So when it came crashing down, my whole life came crashing down. And then this is what I see. I see people going through shock, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance, and then back into hope, some shame as they realize the depth of their problem, and then the processing of it all. Does that sound familiar? Sounds familiar to me. Sounds like any other addiction. And this is what's going on. So what are we going to do about this? So we need to be aware of screen time guidelines. I'm not going to go through all of these, but let's see. Kids and teens, 2 hours. 2 hours or less of recreational screen time. This is from the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry. Adults, which I was very interested in for myself, 2 to 4 hours of recreational screen use per weekday. I'd say it's considerably more than that. But there are apps that you can use, tech to beat tech, that will tell you what you're using. But the recovery goals should be to reduce dopamine expectations, break unhealthy attachments, find new activities and hobbies, create new routines and habits, rebuild the family relationship, improve self-esteem, reduce anxieties, increase face-to-face interactions and friendships. And some practical solutions. I'm aware I've run out of time already. Have I? Yeah, okay, I'll be as quick as I can. Some practical solutions. Limit time and place. So, for instance, take it out of the bedroom, maybe weekends only, internet-free days, get it out into the great outdoors, use self-exclusion blocking software like NetNanny, Covenant Eyes, Disney Circle. Mindfulness helps. Turn phones into grayscale. Use tracking apps, particularly helpful in terms of accountability with sex addiction. Digital solutions for digital problems. Accountability, that would be the tracking apps. Turn off or mute notifications. Look for new rewards. Okay, I'm going to rip through these. So we need to look at it from a biopsychosocial point of view, so pay attention to physical recovery, social recovery. Addiction is all about connection. Recovery from addiction, from my point of view, is all about connection. Basically, it's the opposite of addiction is connection. And look at the emotional side, emotional regulation. And as other people have said in previous presentations, need to find meaning and purpose. Get away from this sense of it's never enough. We need to help people to see that what they have is enough. Appreciation of what is there. Just very quickly, my colleague Andrew DeRosa, when I was thinking about sort of the future, how we can move forward, because the digital world is not going away, he said perhaps Pornhub, for instance, will produce an avatar ambassador, a therapist who guides users through their porn compulsiveness assessment. Good idea, I think. Perhaps Grab Eats might have an avatar therapist who will help customers with alcohol and calorie counts, consumption and portion control, safe alcohol use and dietary information. I think that's possibly how we should head forward. I mean, because there's loads of benefits of digital technology. I'm not standing here and going, internet bad. There's teletherapy sites such as Talkspace and BetterHelp, text-based therapy, chatbots that perform CBT, online platforms matching you to a therapist. There's so much available, the fact that we can do our sessions on Zoom. But there are also drawbacks. There's an element of, as we move into the digital realm for therapy, that there's a quick fix. One of my colleagues referred to therapeutic Tinder, where basically you can because you can choose your therapist through online recommendations, it's very easy to go, I don't like that one, and move on to the next one. So you end up with therapy light. Because what happens is that if the therapist actually challenges the client goes, oh, I don't like that, I'm going to find someone else. So we have to be aware of that. There's less connection through the digital world. And is it trustworthy and safe? Unsure. I would suggest that technology is a poor substitute for personal interaction. Have I got 2 more minutes? 1 more minute. Okay, so this was I went to a site and I spoke to this therapist bot. It was hi Eliza. She said, what would you like to discuss in this session? So I'm feeling a bit down today. How long have you been feeling down today? Most of the day. Can you elaborate on that? I've been feeling a bit down most of today. What would you like to discuss in this session? Feeling down, a bit of hopelessness. Can you elaborate on that? I don't know you. Can you? Don't you believe I can? I'm not sure I understand you fully. No, I'm not sure you do either. Do you believe it's normal to be not sure? Okay, Eliza, I'm leaving now. Did you come to me because you're leaving now? Go away. Okay, Eliza, you're leaving now. Oh, okay. Tell me more, she says. Anyway, so I'm going to just finish with this quote. I love this quote. The opposite of addiction isn't sobriety, it's connection. So really, I feel like in terms of my clients, it's not teaching them necessarily to unplug digitally. The digital world is not going away, but it's also teaching them how to reconnect in a healthy way with others. So thank you. I'm going to end there, and I'm basically going to put up some references, some resources at the end there. So there's an internet addiction test, sex screening test, gaming disorder test, some help for crypto, etc. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Andy. Maybe we can take one question from the audience. Anybody? One question? Do we have time? Anyone? Just one question from the audience, yes.
Sorry, did I talk too long?
Yeah, running a bit late.
Hi.
Sorry.
Hi, I'm Fazli. I am Fazli.
Yes, I heard your wonderful talk. Thank you.
I work in Hospital Kuala Lumpur, and recently, in the recent years, we have been seeing a lot of behavioral addiction coming to us. I have stumbled upon the concept of rebooting or rewiring the mind.
Yes.
Yeah. What's your opinion on that?
Well, absolutely. I mean, addiction to me is a disease of brain reward, motivation, and related circuitry. So it's very much you create an arousal system. The way that I demonstrate that to clients is by talking about the neural pathways that are created in their brain. So they basically have a very set arousal system with particular neural pathways that are triggered, and then people go into cravings, and they then become and it takes them back into their active addiction. So yes, we have to rewire the brain. We have to create new neural pathways, new ways of being, healthy habits. We have to look at that in terms of biopsychosocial, in terms of thought reprocessing. So CBT is really useful. Getting out into the physical world, emotional regulation, as I said, and finding new meaning and purpose. A bit like other people have said today about sort of, you can't just expect someone to just get clean. That's not it. Or free from internet addiction. You need to work on an active recovery. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks very much. Thanks for the question.
One more question, please.
Yes, sure.
Okay.
Quick one.
With the use of app or technology to fight technology, I find it difficult because they still have access to internet.
Yes.
And they need to be a new limit or new boundaries need to be set, and that's the difficulty to advise them to establish that, and also the difficulty of the caretakers to make sure that they stick to the boundaries when they are using technology to fight technology.
Absolutely. You have to be very careful with it, and again, accountability. Apps like Disney Circle is a great app because actually it enables families to have control over what is being used at what time and what sites are being visited. Covenant Eyes, for instance, for those with sex addiction, enables a partner to watch what their parents are looking at, and what their loved ones are looking at, and whether they're basically going on sites that they'd rather not go to. So Yes, but it's, again, down with each individual. Sometimes you need complete abstinence for a period of time to basically completely reset the brain. I mean, at the moment, so I used to work in inpatient rehab, and there we would have an enforced period of 6 weeks of complete abstinence from all screens. At the moment, I work in outpatient. Very, very difficult because people are still working, studying, whatever, but it is about very, very firm and clear boundaries. Yeah. Thanks.
All right, thank you for your question. Thank you, Andy.
Thank you very much. Sorry for going on too long.
No problem. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.